I have about the first 13 slides, and I'll just sort of zip through them, are the years that led up to my coming to Lockheed, okay? And so they're basically from 1959 to 1957. So as you can see, here's Lockheed purchasing the Sunnyvale property, okay? You can just sort of flip through. I don't want to spend a lot of time on, but I just wanted you to get some of the background, okay? Next chart. Here's the Sunnyvale construction beginning. Okay, another picture of it. And then the Sunnyvale facility opening. Again, you can see all the fields. You know, that's the way it virtually was when both Cliff and I came out here too. Okay, next is the Polaris development and the key people working on that in the beginning. Okay, and there you see a picture of it, a model that they were working with. I guess this was an air tunnel that they were using at the time, and you're going to see the Lund facility, which is where they did some scale model tests, okay, of ejecting it. And I think there's a picture from inside. Okay. And there you see it being ready to be launched off the pad. And now we can hold off here for just a minute. I think that's around 14. Okay. So I started out, I was graduated from Mercersburg. I went to, and in 1958, everything was Sputnik, 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 Sputnik. And boy, were we scared. And then we put up this little beeper, if you all recall. And that they were scary times because they were catch-up times. The Russians were ahead of us, and there was no question about it. And then I graduated, went to Cornell a few years later than Dave, about a decade, I guess. And while there, I studied digital logic under H.C. Torn, who was really quite a professor. As a matter of fact, he saved my career because analog was not my thing. And everything back then, as you all know, was vacuum tubes and, you know, and transistors, of course, and I said, do I really want to be an electrical engineer? And then he came along, and digital logic saved the day for me. So after I graduated, I went to work for General Electric in Pittsfield, Mass. And there I started immediately to work on Polaris. And I worked on what they called Antelope. And as Cliff alluded to, they used a digital differential analyzer. And I learned that inside out. Boy, I knew how those registers worked, you know, using the transistors and going into a half adder and you know, computing the incremental differential equations. It was a lot of fun. I think I knew them by gate number. It was that much fun. And then the Polaris Agreement came along. We worked with the United Kingdom, and they've been with us ever since. They're our partners. And so I worked with them. I went out to what was called POMFPAC at the time, Polaris Missile Facility at Bremerton. And so I actually worked with them in future years. And so that really expanded my career, which I didn't know at the time, for later years in working with the United Kingdom. So let's see, next. So this was, okay, so the A3 development, and which is what I just talked about. And the next two charts are the C3 development. The next two, I think 15 and 16, you can see in 1966 and 1967, we proposed, well, don't go there yet, okay?
Sorry.
All right, so I worked at GE for 2 years, and during the latter part of that, Draper Labs started developing the Poseidon computer, all right? And that was based on this processors. And so I learned how they worked and learned how to program that, and Cliff came out to, in fact, a course that I was teaching at the time, because no one knew what they were at all. And a couple of weeks later, I got this phone call from the manager of guidance and controls. Lou, well, it was Gene Schott, but Lou Crowder worked for him. And he called me up and said, "Charlie, how would you like to work on the West Coast at Lockheed?" And of course, all I thought about was the Beach Boys and surfing and all that jazz. So I said, "Sure. How soon can you be there?" "Oh, a couple of weeks." So I actually wound up going down to the Eastern Range, doing some work down there that I had to finish up, and then I left and drove across the country and found out that the water was very cold out here. So when I came into to work at Lockheed, my first impression was those rows of gray Navy desks. And generally there were 4 to a set, and there was a telephone line that came down from the ceiling, and 4 of us shared a common telephone line. And that was the beginning of my career at Lockheed. So, of course, one of the first things they wanted to know was, "Charlie, how does that guidance computer work?" And so I started translating the program, and so that we could simulate and make sure that we were integrated with our associate contractors. Well, subsequent to that, then let's see, chart 17. Okay. They said, "Charlie, how about heading up an ID program on digital design and computer?" Looks pretty simplistic, doesn't it? Well, from about 1968 to 1970, and you can see this is just prior to Cliff designing the C4 computer, okay, flight controls, we headed up this ID program, and where we applied this new knowledge that were bringing to the campus, because believe me, the campus was all analog. They couldn't even spell digital when I arrived. And they asked me if I would teach a course on Stanford Television, and then also and then out at De Anza College, and I did that for 8 years. Taught a 3-course series in digital design. So that of course was a lot of fun. But I was saved later on, because then I went to work and working with the United Kingdom and doing some follow-up work there. So I got some variety. At the same time, Cliff was working on some other concepts, and the design of the initial design of the computer. I was thinking about some high-speed processes for tracking methods, and so because I had some experience in some of the digital arithmetic approaches, I had some feeling how to do that, so I looked at the CDC Control Data Corporation, the 6400 at the time, and Ivan Flores was a famous professor at the time. So I came up with a scheme whereby using those look-ahead concepts and associative memories, which, by the way, they were just MSI, they were 4 bits per chip, okay? Associative memories, came up with a scheme for data compression and so on. And of course, Cliff did a lot of work on that sort of thing later on. Had a lot of fruition to it. So we took the concepts of cascaded networks and this sort of thing and incorporated those into our designs. So one sidetrack here, while we were working in our buildings there, every week we got our paycheck, right? Well, we used to, because it was hand to mouth, basically, we used to cash our paychecks every week. Well, Brinks came in, they had a guy there at a podium, and every Thursday afternoon after we got our checks, and we'd go up and cash in our paychecks. Well, one day he got robbed, so they stopped that. So let's see. This picture here shows you then the ID program and the computer that we were designing at the time. The next page shows you some of the pages inside it, okay, and some of the MSI, SSI chips that we used. And of course, back then we even, we used wire wrap. Believe it or not, I had a wire wrap certificate so I could train people how to wire wrap. Okay. I don't know if any of you recall that, but so that was a lot of fun. Next chart, let's see, 19 then, yeah. This was what we called the Mark 500 at the time, and I was on a panel there. It was a GE in Philadelphia, and I'm sure Dave would remember this. And this is a lot of the fun type experiments we did back then, and an application of a digital flight computer to this sort of thing, where it wasn't just pure ballistic, but we were able to do some control of the reentry body. So then, in the next chart, chart 20, I think, there is 1977, that's the Trident C4. That's with the first digital flight controls, and that's what, of course, Cliff was known for and was responsible for developing, and all that, growing out of all that previous effort, which we were mutually, everyone was very proud of. In charts 21, here we have the Trident II D5 development, and that in the next two charts. Okay, here we see it being tested and ready for shipment. And this, of course, is very famous. Dave said, we had, of course, the resources way back, and we were allowed to fail, if you will, because we're all learning for the first time. Well, this time around, they thought, well, you guys know it all, and all you have to do is, scale things, and everything ought to work. Well, it didn't quite work, okay? So, we were very fortunate in being able to convince the Navy and the government that indeed we could come up with a solution in an extremely short period of time, which indeed we did. We put all our resources to it, worked day and night, and of course we have a successful system that we are flying today, and of course very proud of. Next chart. So subsequent to that, then today, just recently, we have finally developed the extension program in order to extend the life of the program, and that is where indeed we are today. So overall, one of the big points that I would like to leave you with is that this truly has been and is an adventure in partnership. It's unique in the industry. I don't think there's any question about it. All the contractors that have worked together through the years, yes, there have been some changes, but the fundamental principles have remained in place, and people are open in their thoughts between the government and the contractors and working together. Integrity is the bottom line. It really is. Integrity is the bottom line. And so it's still my pleasure, having achieved 50 years on the program, to still be working on it. So thank you.